The champagne stung my eyes, a cruel mockery of celebration as they dragged me away. I could still hear the music, the laughter, the sickeningly sweet clinking of glasses raised in a toast to my ruin. They thought they had silenced me, stripped me bare in front of everyone I loved. They were wrong. This wasn't my end. It was their beginning. If you have a sibling you love more than anything in the world, subscribe now. My name is Isla, and up until that day, I believed in fairy tales. I had meticulously planned every detail of my wedding, pouring my heart and soul into creating a magical experience for everyone who had touched mine and David's lives. The southern estate, with its sprawling gardens and antebellum charm, was the perfect setting. The six-tier red velvet cake, a masterpiece of confectionery art, stood as a testament to the sweetness of our love. $80,000. That's what it cost. $80,000 for what I thought would be the happiest day of my life, a day now stained with betrayal. My sister, Clara, had been my maid of honor, my confidant, my rock. We had always been close, sharing secrets and dreams under the cloak of childhood innocence. At least, that's what I thought. From the moment David proposed, Clara had been overly involved, offering unsolicited opinions on everything from the floral arrangements to the seating chart. I brushed it off as sisterly enthusiasm, grateful for her supposed support. She even insisted on handling the drinks for the bridal party, claiming she wanted to ensure everything was perfect. I remember her mixing something special for me, a celebratory concoction she called Isla's Elixir, a mix of champagne and elderflower liqueur. It tasted delicious, and I remember feeling light and happy as I sipped it throughout the morning. Looking back, the feeling was a little too good. I chalked it up to the excitement and the relief that everything was finally coming together. As Isla stood at the altar, saying her vows, the world was perfect, until it wasn't. The reception was in full swing when I started to feel strange. A wave of dizziness washed over me, followed by a creeping paranoia. The music seemed distorted, the faces of my loved ones blurred. I tried to focus on David, but even his presence felt distant, unreal. Then came the hallucinations. Fleeting images, whispers in the air, a sense of impending doom. I stumbled, clutching at the table for support, my heart pounding in my chest. Someone screamed. I didn't know why. Everything spiraled into chaos. I collapsed. Later, I would learn that Clara had enhanced my drink with a substance that induced temporary psychosis, a calculated act of malice masked as sisterly love. The humiliation was total. The shame, unbearable. My perfect wedding, my perfect life, shattered into a million pieces at her hand. The whispers started, "She's crazy. She's always been unstable." I knew something like this would happen. The person I trusted most was one of them. The aftermath was a blur of hospital rooms, hushed voices, and concerned glances. They pumped my stomach, ran tests, and subjected me to a battery of psychological evaluations. The doctors attributed the episode to a rare reaction to the elderflower liqueur, conveniently overlooking Clara's eagerness to provide the special ingredient. David, initially supportive, grew distant, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and suspicion. He visited less and less, his phone calls becoming shorter, his excuses more frequent. The whispers followed me like a shadow, poisoning every interaction, every relationship. My friends, once eager to celebrate my happiness, now avoided me, unsure how to navigate the supposed crazy girl. My parents, heartbroken and confused, struggled to reconcile the daughter they knew with the image painted by that day. The weight of their disappointment was almost as crushing as the betrayal itself. I lost my job, my reputation, my sense of self. I was adrift, lost in a sea of doubt and recrimination. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every time I closed my eyes, I relived the wedding, the dizzying sensation, the horrified faces. I saw Clara's smug smile, David's retreating figure. The hallucinations returned in my dreams, morphing into grotesque caricatures of my fears and insecurities. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, the phantom taste of champagne and elderflower coating my tongue. I tried to explain what happened, to convince everyone that I wasn't crazy, that something had been done to me. But my words fell on deaf ears, dismissed as the ramblings of a damaged mind. The more I protested, the more convinced they became of my instability. I was trapped in a vicious cycle, my truth buried beneath layers of lies and deception. I consulted lawyers, desperate to clear my name, to prove that I had been drugged. But without concrete evidence, my claims were dismissed as unfounded. Clara, the picture of innocence, vehemently denied any wrongdoing, claiming she was as shocked and devastated as everyone else. David, swayed by her performance, sided with her, further isolating me. The legal fees mounted, draining my savings, leaving me financially vulnerable and emotionally exhausted. Each failed attempt to seek justice chipped away at my resolve, pushing me closer to the brink. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, the silence amplifying my despair, I considered giving up. The weight of the world felt too heavy to bear. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. I thought of my grandmother, a woman of immense strength and resilience who had overcome countless obstacles in her life. She had taught me to never back down, to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. Her memory fueled my determination. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them destroy me. I would uncover the truth, expose their lies, and reclaim my life. The first step was to understand what exactly Clara had given me. I managed to get a sample of the leftover Isla's elixir from one of the caterers, claiming it was for sentimental reasons. They looked at me strangely, but complied. I sent the sample to a private lab for analysis, masking my identity to avoid any potential interference. The results came back a week later, confirming my suspicions. The drink had been laced with a potent hallucinogenic substance, one that could easily induce the symptoms I had experienced. It was concrete evidence, proof that I wasn't crazy. But it was also a dangerous weapon, one that could be used against me. I knew that presenting the evidence directly to the authorities would be futile. Clara and David had already successfully manipulated the narrative, painting me as unstable and unreliable. Any attempt to expose them through conventional channels would likely backfire, further damaging my reputation and credibility. I needed a different approach, a strategy that would allow me to control the narrative, to reveal the truth on my own terms. I started documenting everything, meticulously recording every conversation, every interaction. I became a ghost in my own life, observing and collecting evidence. I knew that Clara and David were planning something, that their betrayal extended far beyond ruining my wedding. I could sense it in their hushed whispers, their furtive glances, the way they avoided my gaze, but I couldn't figure out what it was. They thought I was broken. They thought I was defeated. They were wrong. The game had just begun. I smiled. I acted broken, but I was recording everything. The apartment felt like a cage. Each day bled into the next, a monotonous cycle of despair and isolation. I lost track of time, the outside world fading into a distant memory. Food became a chore, a tasteless necessity rather than a source of nourishment. I neglected my appearance, my reflection in the mirror a stranger staring back with hollow eyes. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional ring of the phone, usually a bill collector or a concerned relative offering platitudes I couldn't bear to hear. I started drinking. Just a glass of wine in the evening to quiet the voices in my head. But one glass turned into two, then three, the numbing effect a temporary escape from the crushing reality. The alcohol dulled the pain, blurred the edges of my despair, but it also fueled my anger, amplifying the resentment that simmered beneath the surface. I would spend hours replaying the wedding in my mind, dissecting every moment, every interaction, searching for clues, for answers. The more I drank, the more vivid the memories became, the sharper the sting of betrayal. I started having nightmares, vivid dreams of Clara's face, twisted into a mask of malice, David's eyes, filled with judgment and scorn. I would wake up screaming, my body trembling, the line between reality and nightmare blurred. One night, fueled by alcohol and rage, I decided to confront them. I drove to David's house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The rain was coming down in sheets, blurring the streetlights, mirroring the turmoil in my mind. I parked across the street, watching the house, waiting for a sign. Hours passed, the rain relentless, the darkness consuming. Finally, I saw them. David and Clara emerged from the house, laughing, their arms intertwined. They looked happy, carefree, oblivious to the pain they had caused. A wave of nausea washed over me, followed by an overwhelming urge to make them suffer, to make them feel the same anguish I had endured. I started the car, my foot pressing down on the accelerator. I imagined the headlights illuminating their faces, the screech of the tires, the impact. In that moment, I was capable of anything. The car lurched forward, the engine roaring, the distance between us shrinking. But then I saw something that stopped me cold. A small child, no older than 5, ran out of the house, calling out to David. He scooped her up in his arms, kissing her on the forehead. Clara smiled, her hand resting on his shoulder. It was their child, a secret they had kept from me. A family they had built on lies and deceit. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt just feet from the curb. My vision blurred, my body trembling, the weight of my actions crushing me. I could have ended them. I could have ended an innocent child. The thought was horrifying, sickening. I threw the car into reverse, speeding away from the house, the rain washing away my tears. I drove aimlessly for hours, lost in a sea of self-loathing and despair. I was no better than them. I had allowed my anger and resentment to consume me, turning me into a monster. I pulled over to the side of the road, burying my face in my hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I had hit rock bottom. There was nowhere else to go. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale light across the horizon, a sense of clarity washed over me. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them destroy me. I wouldn't sink to their level. I would fight back, but I would do it with intelligence, with precision, with a cold, calculating resolve. I would use their own lies against them. I would expose their secrets, reveal their true faces to the world. The desire for revenge burned within me, a fierce, unwavering flame. But this time, it was tempered with a sense of purpose, a determination to reclaim my life, to restore my honor. I started researching. I spent hours online, digging into Clara and David's past, searching for any weaknesses, any vulnerabilities. I discovered that David's business was on the verge of collapse, burdened by debt and shady dealings. Clara, it turned out, had a history of manipulating people, of using her charm and beauty to get what she wanted. They were both hiding something big, their biggest weakness. They thought they were untouchable. I began meticulously documenting everything. I recorded phone calls, saved emails, collected evidence of their lies and betrayals. I became a master of disguise, observing them from the shadows, gathering information they never suspected I possessed. I enrolled in a self-defense class, learning how to protect myself, how to fight back if necessary. I started working out, regaining my strength, both physically and mentally. I cut back on the alcohol, focusing on my health, on my well-being. I surrounded myself with supportive friends, people who believed in me, who encouraged me to fight for what was right. It was a long, arduous process, but with each step, I felt my confidence growing, my resolve hardening. The victim was gone. In her place stood a woman of steel, forged in the fires of betrayal, determined to seek justice. The plan had begun. I knew that simply exposing David's financial problems wouldn't be enough. It would hurt him, certainly, but it wouldn't address the core of their betrayal, the calculated cruelty of their actions. I needed to strike at something more fundamental, something that would unravel their carefully constructed facade and reveal the darkness beneath. That's when I started focusing on Clara. Her pristine image, her reputation as a pillar of the community, her seemingly flawless life, it was all a carefully crafted lie. I started digging into her past, scouring social media, old yearbooks, public records, anything that could offer a glimpse behind the mask. It took weeks, but finally I found it. A small, almost insignificant detail, buried deep in an online forum, a mention of a past relationship, a messy breakup, and a restraining order. The name was redacted, but the details were intriguing. I tracked down the individual, a former business partner of Clara's, living in another state. He was hesitant at first, understandably wary of dredging up the past, but after a series of carefully worded emails and phone calls, I managed to convince him to meet. What he told me was shocking. Clara had been manipulative and controlling, sabotaging his business, spreading rumors about him, and ultimately driving him to the brink of ruin. When he tried to break free, she had become vindictive, harassing him and his family, leading to the restraining order. It was a pattern of behavior, a glimpse into the true nature of the woman behind the angelic smile. This was the leverage I needed. My plan was multifaceted, a carefully orchestrated sequence of events designed to expose their lies and shatter their carefully constructed world. First, I needed to create a platform, a stage upon which I could reveal the truth without being dismissed as a crazy ex-girlfriend. I decided to start a blog, anonymously at first, documenting my experiences, my feelings, my journey from victim to survivor. I wrote about the wedding, the betrayal, the aftermath, but I carefully omitted any names or identifying details, focusing instead on the emotional impact of the events. The blog gained traction slowly at first, but as more and more people resonated with my story, it began to attract a following. People who had experienced similar betrayals, who had been gaslit and manipulated, found solace and validation in my words. I cultivated this community, fostering a sense of solidarity and shared purpose. Once I had established a sufficient audience, I began to subtly introduce details about Clara and David, still without naming them directly, but providing enough clues for my readers to piece together the puzzle. I posted excerpts from the police report, transcripts of my conversations with the lawyers, and anonymously submitted articles about David's failing business, all carefully crafted to avoid any legal repercussions. The whispers started again, but this time they were different. This time they were on my side. I also knew that I needed irrefutable evidence, something that would silence any doubts and shatter their credibility beyond repair. That's where the recordings came in. I had been secretly recording my conversations with Clara and David for months, capturing their lies, their contradictions, their subtle admissions of guilt. I used a variety of methods, from hidden microphones to voice recording apps on my phone, always careful to comply with local laws regarding consent and privacy. The recordings were a treasure trove of incriminating evidence, but they were also potentially dangerous. If Clara or David discovered that I was recording them, they could take legal action against me, potentially derailing my entire plan. I had to be meticulous, cautious, and always one step ahead. One afternoon, Clara invited herself over to my apartment, feigning concern and offering to help me move on. I knew it was a trap, a thinly veiled attempt to assess my state of mind and gauge how much I knew. I played along, acting fragile and vulnerable, allowing her to believe that she had me fooled. As she sipped her tea and offered platitudes, I secretly activated the recording device hidden in a houseplant. The conversation was revealing. Clara subtly steered the conversation towards the wedding, probing for details, trying to trip me up. She feigned sympathy, but her eyes betrayed her true feelings, a mixture of triumph and contempt. At one point, she even alluded to the fact that she had helped me relax on my wedding day, a veiled admission of her involvement. I kept my composure, answering her questions carefully, revealing nothing, all the while knowing that her words were being recorded, meticulously documented, and would one day be used against her. It was a delicate dance, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, but I was determined to win. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I knew that the time was drawing near, that the moment of truth was fast approaching. I had gathered all the evidence I needed, meticulously crafted my plan, and assembled a team of trusted allies who were ready to support me. I had a lawyer who specialized in defamation cases, a forensic accountant who could expose David's financial misdeeds, and a tech expert who could ensure that my blog remained anonymous and secure. Each of them understood the risks involved, but they were all committed to helping me seek justice. I spent weeks rehearsing my presentation, anticipating every question, every objection. I knew that I had to be calm, collected, and persuasive, presenting my case with clarity and conviction. I practiced my speech in front of a mirror, perfecting my tone, my body language, my eye contact. I visualized the moment of truth, imagining the look on Clara and David's faces as their lies unraveled, as their world crumbled around them. I knew that it wouldn't be easy, that they would fight back, that they would try to discredit me, but I was prepared for anything. I had come too far, sacrificed too much to back down now. The day they tried to end me, I would expose the truth. The former business partner's story was a goldmine, but it needed verification. I couldn't risk basing my entire plan on hearsay, no matter how credible the source. I needed concrete proof, something undeniable that would expose Clara's true nature to the world. I decided to focus on the restraining order. If I could obtain a copy of the court documents, it would be irrefutable evidence of her past behavior. But court records were often sealed, especially in cases involving harassment and personal disputes. I needed a way to access them legally, without raising any red flags. I contacted a private investigator, a former law enforcement officer with years of experience in tracking down sensitive information. I explained my situation, omitting the details about my personal connection to Clara, portraying it instead as a matter of public interest, a story of a woman who had repeatedly abused her power and influence to harm others. The investigator was intrigued. He agreed to take on the case, assuring me that he had ways of accessing the records discreetly and efficiently. Days turned into weeks, the waiting almost unbearable. I tried to distract myself, focusing on my blog, my self-defense classes, my support network. But Clara's face haunted my dreams, her image a constant reminder of the injustice I had suffered. Finally, the investigator called. He had the documents. The restraining order was even more damning than I had imagined. It detailed a pattern of harassment, stalking, and intimidation that painted Clara in a completely different light than the polished facade she presented to the world. The documents included emails, text messages, and witness statements that described her behavior in chilling detail. She had sabotaged her former business partner's career, spread rumors about his personal life, and even threatened his family. The restraining order was a clear indication that Clara was capable of extreme cruelty and manipulation, that she was willing to stop at nothing to get what she wanted. This was the ammunition I needed to take her down. But I couldn't simply release the documents to the public. I needed to present them in a way that would maximize their impact, that would expose Clara's lies, and shatter her credibility beyond repair. I decided to use her upcoming charity gala as the stage for my revelation. It was the perfect venue, a high-profile event attended by the city's elite, a gathering of influential people who admired and respected Clara. It was also an event that Clara had meticulously planned and orchestrated, an opportunity for her to showcase her generosity and compassion. By exposing her at the gala, I would not only ruin her reputation, but also undermine her carefully constructed image of perfection. The plan was intricate, a delicate dance between exposure and plausible deniability. I couldn't directly accuse Clara of anything without risking a defamation lawsuit. I needed to create a situation where the truth would reveal itself, where Clara's own actions would expose her lies. I decided to use the charity auction as my weapon. I anonymously donated a series of items to the auction, each carefully chosen to highlight a different aspect of Clara's hypocrisy. A framed photograph of Clara and David at my wedding, a subtle reminder of their betrayal. A collection of articles about David's failing business, hinting at his financial struggles. And most damningly, a replica of the restraining order, disguised as a piece of artwork, with the key details subtly highlighted. The items were innocuous on their own, but when viewed together, they would paint a clear picture of Clara and David's deception. I also planned to release the recordings of my conversations with Clara, but only at the opportune moment, when the atmosphere was ripe with suspicion and doubt. The recordings would be the final nail in the coffin, the irrefutable proof of her guilt. I knew that I was taking a huge risk, that my plan could backfire spectacularly. But I was willing to do anything to expose the truth, to reclaim my life, to seek justice for the pain they had inflicted upon me. The stage was set. The players were in place. The game was about to begin. I secured a ticket to the gala under an assumed name, careful to avoid any contact with Clara or David. I wanted to observe them from a distance, to witness their reactions as my plan unfolded. The gala was everything I had expected, a lavish affair filled with champagne, glittering gowns, and self-congratulatory speeches. Clara was the center of attention, radiating charm and grace as she mingled with the guests. David stood by her side, his face a mask of forced smiles and nervous glances. I could sense the tension in the air, the undercurrent of anxiety that simmered beneath the surface. I knew that they were both aware of the rumors swirling around them, that they were desperately trying to maintain their composure in the face of impending exposure. As the auction began, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it, the moment of truth. The first item up for bid was the framed photograph of Clara and David at my wedding. The auctioneer presented it with a flourish, describing it as a celebration of love and friendship. A wave of nausea washed over me as I watched Clara and David exchange knowing glances, their faces betraying a hint of unease. The bidding started slowly, but as the price climbed higher, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. People started whispering, pointing, and glancing in Clara and David's direction. The tension was palpable. The next item was the collection of articles about David's failing business. The auctioneer attempted to downplay the negative news, portraying it as a temporary setback, but the damage had already been done. The whispers grew louder, the glances more pointed. I could see the color draining from David's face as he realized that his financial troubles were now public knowledge. He tried to maintain his composure, but his hands were trembling, his eyes darting nervously around the room. The moment of truth had arrived. Finally, the auctioneer presented the replica of the restraining order, describing it as a unique piece of abstract art. The artwork consisted of various legal documents, creatively arranged and framed. Most people probably wouldn't understand what it was at first glance, but I made sure to manipulate the key aspects of it. For those that knew what they were looking at, the damning truth would become very clear. I watched as Clara approached the stage, her face a mask of confusion and concern. As she examined the artwork more closely, I saw her eyes widen in horror. She recognized the documents. She knew that her secret had been exposed. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as people began to understand the significance of the artwork. The whispers turned into murmurs, the murmurs into outright accusations. Clara's carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. She turned to David, her eyes filled with panic and betrayal. He stared back at her, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. The recordings of my conversations with Clara, the final piece of my plan, were set to release to the public in 60 seconds. The exact day they tried to end me, I would expose the truth. The room was a symphony of horrified whispers. Then the hammer dropped. My tech expert, bless his soul, unleashed the recordings. They flooded social media, news outlets, every corner of the internet. Clara's voice, dripping with condescension, casually admitting to her role in helping me relax on my wedding day. David's frantic lies about his business, exposed as the desperate fabrications they were. And the crescendo, Clara's unhinged rant against her former business partner, a chilling testament to her capacity for cruelty. The effect was instantaneous. Clara's face, once a picture of composed elegance, crumbled like ancient pottery. Her eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for an escape, a lifeline, anything to cling to as her carefully constructed world disintegrated. David stood frozen, his face ashen, his body trembling. The whispers intensified, morphing into open accusations, disgusted murmurs. People recoiled from them as if they were contagious, their smiles replaced by glares of contempt. The charity gala, intended to be Clara's crowning achievement, had become her public execution. Clara tried to speak, to deny, to explain, but the words caught in her throat, choked by the weight of her lies. She reached for David, seeking support, but he flinched away from her touch, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resentment. He knew that she had dragged him down with her, that their carefully crafted facade had been shattered beyond repair. Their faces were plastered across every screen. Headlines screamed their treachery. Their friends, their colleagues, their entire social circle vanished overnight, like ghosts in the wind. David's business, already teetering on the brink, collapsed completely, his investors fleeing, his reputation ruined. Clara's philanthropic endeavors, once celebrated, were now viewed with suspicion, her motives questioned, her reputation tarnished. They lost everything. Their money, their status, their friends, their reputations. They were ostracized, shamed, and utterly alone. The weight of their deception had finally crushed them. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a quiet observer in the chaos I had orchestrated. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on my lips. It wasn't a smile of joy or triumph or even satisfaction. It was a smile of closure. The pain they had inflicted upon me, the years of torment and betrayal, had finally been avenged. The scales had been balanced. Justice had been served. I had taken my life back. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment, the glow of the city lights painting streaks across my face. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a sense of quiet exhaustion. I replayed the events of the evening in my mind, each detail etched into my memory. The look on Clara's face as she realized her lies had been exposed. The sound of the whispers as her world crumbled around her. The feeling of finally reclaiming my power. Revenge isn't sweet. It's not a celebration. It doesn't bring happiness. But sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes it's the only way to heal, to find closure, to move on. It's about reclaiming what was stolen from you, your dignity, your peace, your life. It's about standing up for yourself, refusing to be a victim, and saying enough. It's about justice. They tried to break me, to silence me, to destroy me, but they failed. I emerged from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. They lost everything. I just smiled. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.